Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, January 18th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 228 days, the game against Michigan in 313 days. On Monday was the deadline to declare for the NFL draft. The Buckeyes ended up getting some pretty crucial players back. We are recording this right now on Monday evening, and there are a couple guys who still technically haven't officially said they're coming back, but it seems like the longer this goes, the more likely it is that if we haven't heard anything, no news is good news for Ohio State. So we're going to kind of run through some of the guys who are leaving early, some of the guys who are coming back, and sort of what kind of impact that's going to have on the 2022 Ohio State football season, because early departures probably hurt the 2021 Buckeyes quite a bit, but they're getting a number of guys back. So it should bode pretty well for 2022, I think. Someone that I'm getting back on this show is Buckeye Scoop's Tony Gerdeman. He's been here before. He never seems to run out of eligibility. Tony, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Tom. It's the way of the world when we're waiting for players to announce on social media whether or not they're staying or going. And if they haven't, then they can't possibly be leaving because they haven't said anything. They haven't tweeted about it. They haven't posted it on Instagram. I don't believe you're allowed to leave unless you make it known via social media.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't eat a meal without putting it on Instagram, it feels like you shouldn't leave college without putting it on Instagram. Some of them were a little more cryptic than others. Zach Harrison didn't just say like, "Hey, I'm coming back." He tweeted the date of the Notre Dame game, which, cool. Who am I to judge people counting down the days of the Notre Dame game? Of all people, who am I to judge? But it was like, you could also just say, "I'm coming back." But the message got through, so that was good. Let's start with there were kind of four names I think that were people who could have come back that left early: Garrett Wilson, Nick Petit-Frere, Master Teague, and Tyreek Smith. And I'm not, for the purposes of this, we're not including Chris Olave, who played his 4 years and technically had a COVID year. We're all living in a bunch of gray area here. So these are the four guys. These are the rules. My show, my rules. If you don't like it, too bad, Tony. Garrett Wilson, Nick Petit-Frere, Master Teague, Tyreek Smith. Are any of those guys? I mean, those are all very good players, and some of them are going to hear their names called fairly early in the NFL draft. Is there one that stands out to you like this is a huge loss for them to lose this person leaving early?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't know that there's one great answer, and that's a testament to the recruiting. I think for me, I am going to say Chris Olave.
No, sorry, that is not an option. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, sorry. Garrett Wilson. I'm sorry. Yes, and see exactly. No, I'm going to say. I was actually.
I'm going to invite you to the podcast transfer portal if you can't follow our program rules, Mister.
I'm sorry, Tom. I'm writing about Garrett Wilson. I wrote about Garrett Wilson on Sunday, and I made sure to mention that. Yes, Marvin Harrison is waiting in the wings, but you don't lose somebody as good as Garrett Wilson, and there isn't a drop off. You will feel it. You can't not. And you look at the other places. Tyreek Smith was never as impactful as I think he had hoped to be, and because of that, I don't know that there's much of a what do you lose by not having him that you're not going to get from somebody replacing him. Now you can say the same thing about Garrett Wilson. I think we all expect Marvin Harrison to post 70 catches and 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns like Garrett Wilson did. But it's still he's one of the all-time greats at Ohio State. There has to be some sort of a letdown. Nick Petit-Frere, the guy replacing him, has been compared to, I know we're not supposed to say, has been compared to Orlando Pace, but that's, and granted, this is going to be his third year and it's going to be the first time he's played that spot. So there is some mystery there. You know what, Tom? I'm going to change my answer. I'm going to go with Nicholas Petit-Frere because he has been so solid last year, the 2020, 2021, and Paris Johnson is still he's not done it yet. So I'm going to go there.
I think both of those are absolutely viable answers because you're right that, there is a next man up waiting for both of them. It's, oh, you lost a 5-star left tackle. How on earth are you going to replace them with another 5-star left tackle? But Nick Petit-Frere had done the job. You have seen him. You have seen great production out of him. Paris Johnson was very good at right guard, but that's a different position. There's a lot of different responsibilities. You're on the different side of the line, and I think with him you may have some of the same stuff. We're talking about replacing Garrett Wilson with Marvin Harrison. The talent's all there, but fourth year Garrett Wilson is going to be a little bit ahead of second year Marvin Harrison, especially at the start of the year. You would probably get a little bit more out of Garrett Wilson than you would out of Marvin Harrison right off the bat next year. And again, there is a pretty significant game right off the bat next year. So, not to take anything away from Marvin Harrison, who was a little better than okay during his first career start with only 3 touchdowns, which, I don't watch a ton of football. That seems good though. So yeah, there is a next man up in all of those spots. But I think those two are probably the two answers. On the staying list, there's a very interesting theme to there are 5 names here, and there's a very interesting theme to 4 of them. Zach Harrison, Jerron Cage, Tyler Friday, Teron Vincent, and then the 5th one is Bradley Robinson, the long snapper. But the first 4, all defensive linemen, and Tyler Friday was kind of the free space on the bingo card here because he was hurt all year, and he was kind of making a push for more time in the end of 2020, and then missed all the 2021 season. So we'll see how he looks when he comes back. But to get Zach Harrison back is I think big. But to me, I mean, Jerron Cage and Teron Vincent on the inside of that defensive line, they have talented young players there. But to have a couple veterans back on the inside of that defensive line, that seems like that might be even bigger than getting a Zach Harrison back, or a Bradley Robinson back.
Yeah. Before we get into that, I just want to mention about Marvin Harrison. Go real quick to that. Keep in mind, 3 of his catches in that game did not go for touchdowns. So let's slow down on the hype.
Merely 50% touchdown, touchdown to reception ratio. That's not a stat that I track particularly closely, but again, that seems pretty good.
Let's just keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm with you. You try to, when you look at who's coming back and you try to weigh them, I do it by saying, imagine they weren't coming back. How empty, how thin is Ohio State in that moment? And it for me, like Jerron Cage and Teron Vincent, those 2 guys are coming back are huge because of who's behind them. And not that there isn't talent, but it's not, there's just not a lot of numbers behind them. Whereas Zach Harrison, you do have Tyler Friday, you have JT Tuimoloau, you have Jack Sawyer, you've got younger guys and some of the freshmen coming in. There are people, but with getting back, even Jerron Cage, who has come this long journey from he's never going to play at Ohio State to now possibly being the most important returner on defense. That's quite a story for him. And it's a testament to the patience, the work, the development. And, we saw him begin to play more and more through last year. And then now without him, because if you were to lose him, you lose Antoine Jackson. Those are your top 2 nose tackles. Where is Tyleik Williams a nose tackle? Is he a 3-tech? Mike Hall, where is he? What is Ty Hamilton? But now, like, you can still answer those questions, but know that you have Jerron Cage to answer the larger question of like who is going to start there, or who is going to get half of those snaps. And that's a huge thing. And the same thing with Teron Vincent as that 3-tech that can be a pass rusher. And he had a very good game in the Rose Bowl. And you look, well, what would they do without him? And again, is that Tyleik Williams? Is that Mike Hall? Is that Noah Potter? The questions for both of those spots are, I don't want to say confusing, but hard to really solidify. And yeah, there may be one guy there. Like Tyleik Williams is going to play somewhere, but what kind of depth do you have behind him? And now that you've got them both back, you can mix the pieces and figure out where things work best. And you're not as thin, you're not grasping. Like there's some solid pieces to put in there. So, you lose Zach Harrison, and I still think his best is ahead of him. So getting him back, I think, is a good thing. You can see how he is used in the Jim Knowles defense. I I don't know that it's going to be like, I don't know that his production is going to be all that different, because I do see him kind of more as like the strong side defensive end in the Jim Knowles defense. And if you look at the numbers from the strong side defensive ends this past year in Jim Knowles defense, it's like 3.5 sacks, but like 12 tackles for loss, like getting in there, but you're more of the run defender and a contained guy, which is what Zach Harris is probably best at anyway.
Yeah, he's interesting to me because I'm with you that I think Cage and Vincent are kind of the most important or the most significant potentially for next year in terms of if they weren't, if not then who. But Harrison might have the highest upside of any of the people we talked about there, just because, we saw him. I'm with you. I think he's, that strong side defensive end where, it's him and Tui Moloau there and maybe Friday there. And then, it's Jack Sawyer at the Leo. But we saw, they only ran that like stand up defensive end behind the nose look like once or twice in the Rose Bowl. And it was Zach Harrison who was doing it. So that's, maybe he does get a little bit of run there if that's how that works. So there's a possibility that is the biggest upside for this year. Before we move on to the last category, I did want to hit, I mentioned Bradley Robinson, and I'm sure everyone's like, long snapper, whatever. Like, do you know why you don't think it matters? Because you haven't heard his name at all. Do you know why you haven't heard his name at all? Because they haven't had any bad long snaps. Like, think about all the teams that have long snappers firing balls over punters' heads or bad snaps on field goals and all that kind of stuff. I can't remember one from Bradley Robinson. Like, that's pretty darn good. He's also, as someone who is shooting photos on the field, I can tell you, Bradley Robinson is down the field in the punt returner's face constantly. Bradley Robinson is a big reason that the gunners get all the shine. But I have a lot of photos of Bradley Robinson about 3 feet from the punt returner's head with the ball coming down at the punt returner, and that's why he's waving fair catch. So that is a low key, very big deal to get him back for his 7th year. Plus, he used a Tommy Boy quote in announcing that he was coming back, so he gets bonus points for that as well. There are 2 names that we technically haven't heard, and again, as I mentioned off the top, I'm sort of assuming no news is good news on this front for Ohio State. DeJuan Jones, starting right tackle. Noah Ruggles, starting kicker. Ruggles like openly said after the Rose Bowl, like he was kind of considering it, and he hasn't announced anything either way. DeJuan Jones hasn't either. My assumption is if they haven't announced, and we're kind of past the deadline at this point, that probably they're coming back. I mean, Ruggles was just about perfect this year. I think he missed 1 field goal all season. And DeJuan Jones was, he went into that Michigan game with, I think, 0 or 1 sacks allowed and didn't have a great game against Michigan, but lots of people didn't have great games against Michigan and rebounded to have a pretty good game in the Rose Bowl. If you get him back and you're only replacing 1 tackle, that's a pretty big deal for that offensive line.
Yeah. And this is another one where it's, if he is gone, what do you do? And that's why getting him back is so huge, not just because it secures that spot, but it elevates that offensive line from what could be a chain with a weak link to a really strong unit. It could be one of the best in the country. Just him coming back, because without him, who knows what they have. And we've gone over the names: Enoch Vamahi, Josh Fryer, Donovan Jackson, any of the other actual tackles, like Grant Toutant, or, all of these different names where they're each a question mark. And it could be a situation where this guy starts for 2 games and then he gets benched, and then it's just this guy for 3 games. And you're just searching the entire year for that one guy to solidify the line. But if DeJuan Jones is coming back, and at this point, that's what we're led to believe, because again, he has not legally said anything on social media, so I don't know how you could possibly leave. It's one less worry, especially for a new offensive line coach in Justin Fry, where you've got this veteran. Now you build the depth behind him and you figure out what other pieces. But it's very easy if he comes back to say, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy are my starters. This guy could end up being a starter because they have that much depth and they have that many pieces. But if DeJuan Jones didn't come back, now you're looking at like, well, I know 4 of the guys, but you're so concerned about the right tackle situation. And so him coming back, I think maybe of all of the moves, I think maybe his is the most significant.
Yeah, that is for sure a big one. And anytime you're replacing an offensive lineman or two, the difference between going, replacing like one or two offensive linemen and three or four offensive linemen is generally the difference between potential championship season and might be a step back kind of season. So if you get that other tackle back, you're only replacing one of your tackles, and that's just a slide outside. And you've got Matt Jones and you've got Luke Whippler, and then it's like you're really only filling one hole. You're really only filling Thayer Munford's hole to fill that spot on the offensive line. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. So yeah, that I think changes the ceiling for the team a little bit in terms of the offense. And before we go, I did want to touch on this. And if you have listened to the start of literally any of these shows, I always start the game with start the show with a little bit of a countdown. And the reason that I thought, hey, that's a thing I could do is because of something that happened 7,670 days ago today. Jim Tressel's 310-day speech, that was 21 years ago today. Yes, we are all literally a trillion years old. Tony, to you, where does that rank among the biggest off-field moments of this century of Ohio State football?
Boy, off field, and you're talking like coaching hires and things like that. I mean, it's just that moment to just say enough, and we're mad as hell. We're not going to take it anymore. That's kind of what that was. And just imagine, Tom, if you will, if Twitter was around, at halftime of that game, and he says that, and you are like this, it would be trending for until the next day, and it still did that without there being Twitter. Like it was all over the message boards. It was one of those things. I think coming back from halftime or something like that, they showed it, because I don't believe they showed it live on the broadcast, but it was huge, and it was one of those things that just it set the tone. But I think maybe what really made it was the game then in beating Michigan in 2001. That's kind of what solidified it and cemented it. And because I don't know that anybody would we talk about it if Ohio State had lost that game in 2001? I don't know.
No, I mean, it would go down with the Karan Higdon guarantee of a win in 2018. And it's like, oh, that was a fun footnote that week that we sort of talk about, but it's just, no one remembers the people that guaranteed a win and then didn't follow through. And Tressel always went to great pains to say he didn't guarantee a win. He didn't, he just said you'd be proud of the young people on the field. And, I mean, as John Cooper always liked to say, Ohio State fans are with you win or tie. So, there's not generally a lot of pride taken in losses. So you could sort of do the math there. But two thoughts on that one. Number one, later that year, it was like the Ohio State Alumni Association, Football Alumni Association golf outing. And I worked at Channel 4 at the time, and we got to go talk to Tressel at this golf outing in June or whatever. And we went through a whole interview thing. And at the end, I said, okay, I'm not going to run this if you don't know the answer, but do you know how many days there are till the Michigan game today? And it, like, before I had it out of my mouth, he said, 142 or whatever there was, and just kind of smiled at me and patted me on the shoulder and said, but you knew that already. I did not know that already, but it was a good soundbite. We ran it on the news that night. The other thing that we were talking before the show about that day that Tressel got hired, and long time older folks will know, remember Jimmy Crum, the long time NBC4 sportscaster in Columbus. He was retired at that point, but still would pop into the station every once in a while. And when Tressel did his press conference on that afternoon, Jimmy Crum was never a big fan of John Cooper's, and I'm not telling stories out of school. That was well known around Columbus. He was never a particularly huge fan of John Cooper's, but he was very, very impressed with the Jim Tressel press conferences. I think everyone was. The introductory press conference, and Jimmy Crum said very gruffly, like, "Oh, it's the first time they've had it. Or that's the best speech I've heard from an Ohio State football coach in 13 years. This is the first time Ohio State's had a football coach in 13 years." It was like, oh boy, well, that was spicy. So statute of limitations on that one is out. So it has indeed been 21 years. So And there's a certain segment of the audience that I'm sure that remembers and knows and loves Jimmy Crump. So thought I'd share that one today as a 21 years ago today. Any other thoughts, Tony, before we go for the day?
No, I do remember that press conference, and we went working as a civilian then, and a bunch of us went and sat in a bar for lunch, I think, and watched it. And we were just like looking at each other like, oh man, this guy gets it. This is going to be good. Because the hire, everybody's like Jim Tressel, like Youngstown State, okay, whatever. And then you hear him, you see the introduction, you're like, okay, I was wrong. I'm in, and here we are.
Yeah, it was. I was just, as you were talking, I was trying to find one of the great freezing cold takes of all time from the Michigan Daily when Tressel was hired. It was just basically like, one AA coach. Okay, yeah, all right, good luck with that. It was that was one that didn't age particularly well, but the Tressel speech definitely did 21 years ago today. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Make sure you check out all of our great podcasts. Tony and I will have a new episode of the Buckeye Weekly podcast coming up a little later on today. You can find that and all of our other great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it, we're there. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. And also make sure you check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Hit that bell, subscribe to our channel, and you get notified every time we post a new video. And if you don't follow us on Twitter, you should follow us on Twitter. Every once in a while, we'll tweet something interesting. Tony had a great tweet about Gabagool on Monday. If you don't follow him, you missed it. So he is at Tony Gerdeman, TonyGerdeman. I got all those letters. There we go. You have a long name. I do not. Mine is at Tom Orr 4, TOMORR4. You can follow us there. We tweet out links to those podcasts and all kind of stuff. So makes it even easier for you to make sure you never miss an episode. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.